everyone. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us back at the Financial Griot, where we really have money conversations, share stories, and also just a little bit of slice of life. So unlike a lot of other podcasts that are out there, it's a little bit more centric, a little bit more focused, a little bit more, get some guests here and there. We're more of like a hodgepodge. We like to do, bring in different guests. We like to have real conversation with them. We like to kind of like go over what we read, what we saw, and even other podcasts that we listen to and the little nuggets that they actually brought us. So we can actually share that back to you. So thanks again for supporting us, giving us those 5-star ratings on Apple, wherever that is. I don't have an iPhone, so I don't really know what that is. So ultimately, you guys are doing that. You're supporting us. You're downloading. We hit like around like 500 downloads in the first month of us being around. We also landed the Motley Fool's All-Star newsletter as one of the top podcasts to listen to at one point. So it's looking really good, really kind of nice. But this episode is just basically me, Lawrence Delva-Gonzalez, the neighborhood finance guy. I'm usually joined by my co-host, lovely Merdelus, as well as Alainta Alcin. However, they're basically taking a break. One, let's be real. If you learned the last episode, Alainta got a boyfriend. So she's really on the gym game. She's trying to stay, right out there in these streets, and she's, trying to be outside. Whereas Lovely's been working pretty hard trying to scale up her small business, or really her business. When I say small, it sounds kind of like really tiny, but the idea, the scope, the epicness is going to actually grow and scale in and of itself. So she's putting a lot of hard work and a lot of time to do that. So as for me, I'm still clocking in that 9-to-5 struggle, trying to be a automatic millionaire with my wife. And I'm sharing everything that I know on IG and on my website, www.theneighborhoodfinanceguy.com. The entire name spelled all the way out. Do not mess this up, theneighborhoodfinanceguy.com. So thinking about October and the fundamentals of October, where we are, October is supposed to be the financial planning month. I don't know about you guys, but I think they make up these names for every type of month now. So if you don't have a month, you might want to, snag you one or snag you a day, whatever it is, so you could call it your own thing. So ultimately, I'm going to take that idea of financial planning month, and we're going to play around with that aspect. And I'm going to give you some tips in order for you to actually get ahead of the curve and become a lot richer with how you process your money, how you manage it, and how you kind of navigate it throughout the year. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of data. So the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistic, and they usually drop this information, Federal Reserve and all that good stuff, reports that a lot of people don't really read. But ultimately, in that, they found that in 2020, the average American household spent around $61,334, almost exact, dollar signs here and there, in all the different categories of expenses. However, the average household also brought in around $84,352. I know. And when you hear those numbers, you're like, that's not my household, but that's the average. That means there's a whole class of people that's out there that's, spans all the US. So in total, everybody's bringing in different amounts. Some people are bringing a whole lot less. Some people bring a whole lot more. So then they average these households. I think it's 131 households that were surveyed, or 134 that was surveyed. And ultimately, all those households on average, spent around $61,000 in a year in 2020, and they brought in 84,000. And yet again, it's a household. The household is not just a single person. They define a household around like 3 people, being 2 people bringing income, or even maybe there's a third person. Maybe there's a grandma or grandpa in there. But ultimately, there's 3 people in that household, and they're spending this amount. So it's just an average. Just take it to your grain of salt. It's not your numbers, but it's an average. It's better that you know your own personal numbers, that's for sure. But it's also good to get a framework about how everybody's spending. And that's kind of what I like to get into. It's not about just knowing information, but knowing how to break it down and being resourceful with that. Being knowledgeable is different than just taking in knowledge. So in that sense, you have $61,000 being spent and $84,000 being brought into the household. So I started doing a little bit of math work. Hey, you add, subtract. That's the little things that you do. Arithmetic. We all learned that back in, I believe, in elementary school, and then into middle school, and then even all the way to college. So it's very much doable. You take your income minus your expenses. So the average difference between that is $23,018, and pretty much all of that went into taxes. And when you take the $23,000 divided by the 84,000, you find that basically their typical or average tax that they've been spending on is 27.29%. That's pretty much what we're our starting point, right? So now that we know what those the details are, the top expenses in those categories for 2020 were always and probably will always be housing, transportation, and food. Housing being 34.9%, transportation being 16%, and food being 11.9%. Those three categories themselves devastatingly, it's almost like devastatedly, I think that's the word, devastatingly, accounted for 62.80% of your total expenses. And that is insanity. That is just pure insanity. Why? Because the average household, even though we're spending a certain amount and majority of that is on necessities, that's fine. However, those necessities, those needs tend to be super inflated because they're wrapped into our wants. So a lot of the housing that people have now that they're staying in are very expensive, where there's different options that could be inexpensive. So ultimately, the total number that it should be for housing, your total housing should be less than 25% of your take-home pay, and your total transportation should be 8%, and your food cost should be 5%. So in total, that's the difference between how much the total average home is spending in 2020 should be 25% even lower than that. So if I had to do the math, I'd say what 62 might, well, let's just say 63 minus 25. What is it, 28 or 38? Oh, almost, yeah. You're supposed to be a lot lower than that, to like 38%, maybe. Maybe that's what it is. Let me do the math, because I put out the calculator and shame myself in the game. Oh, it's 38. Okay, that's where it is. It's supposed to be 38% in total for your housing, transportation, and food. And the reason it's supposed to be 38 is because the more and more we spend on these things that are wrapped, our needs that are wrapped into it with our wants, it ends up being money that we take away from our investments and our savings. And the longer we take away from those categories, the more and more we have to work. So the ideal here, right, this is why we bring you this information, these stories in the Financial Grill, is to let you know that you need to take more accountability, more intentionality within how you spend your own hard-earned money. Because the more and more that you buy into the lifestyle increases, and the more and more you're going to have to work to support yourself through it. So that's pretty much the problem. So as you say, I broke it down to you guys. You could look at the numbers for yourself. Yeah, you could interpret it for yourself. You could make those changes. But ultimately, I'm trying to, cut through the mustard and let you know that if you're living in a home that you really can't afford, start thinking about either downgrading or something like that. That's going to bring a lot more money into your bank account versus, cutting out a latte or cutting down an extra meal, whatever it is, or even a brunch. Ultimately, if you cut down those three big expenditures, you'll find that you have this extra 25% in order for you to invest. And the 25% investment rate over time would likely net you maybe a 20-year 25-year workflow. So you could even get out of work a lot quicker than sitting around for the 40-year type of workflow. So just food for thought. And with that said, let's say, yeah, it's financial planning month. So this entire conversation, I know it's a lot of information, it's a lot of numbers, and that typically freaks people out. But in truth, we've got to talk about it and we've got to set the stage. So with the financial planning month, I started kind of going back through a calendar and giving everything like a name, an idea, a fundamental, in order for you to use and so you can move forward with. As of January, if October is financial planning month, January itself is when we always typically kick off. We kick off with our goals, our aspirations, our New Year's Eves, resolutions and all that stuff. So I made January to be a smart goals and strategies month. That means you sit back with yourself, you get into that introspective look and say, what are my goals overall? It doesn't even have to be financial. It could be physical. It could be emotional, spiritual. It could be relationship with other people. Ultimately, defining your goals for the year and the trajectory that you're going to take. And on top of that, then you got to step back and say, you know what, it's not only for me to dream, but it's now in order for me to make these things realities, I'm going to actually start need to add a little bit of strategy. How do I get from point A to point B? Yes, I'm not saying that you got to run a 5K tomorrow, but hey, maybe you start running around the block every morning and stuff like that until one day you set out the goal in your goal and say, hey, maybe in January I start running around the block, but in November I'm running a 5 or a 10K. That way you have plenty of time to really structure your life. You change and make those intentional moments matter to you. The next thing is February. February would be more like your wills and estate planning. Yes, a lot of us don't have a ton of cash. Doesn't mean that we can't do we want to make sure our wills are right. You know, they're accurate. They're, you know, where they're supposed to be. They're structures for the family. They're accessible to whoever it needs to be accessible in case of our early demise, whatever it is, or even to the point where you talk to your parents, find out what their wills and estate planning is. This is an opportunity for you to have a conversation in February with yourself, with your loved ones, with your significant other, with your parents, to really establish a more of a stability aspect or a pure financial security perspective on how your money would be handled in case you passed. So it's an opportunity to double check. As for March 2022, in that case, would be more so like the financial spring cleaning month, right? March itself, it presents a few opportunities that a lot of people don't know. Is one, you could start decreasing your expenses, making sure that you're not buying into so many of those things that you bought into last year. That extra Netflix, are you really well? I've watched Netflix a lot, so are you really watching Disney Plus as much as you think you are? Are you really watching HBO Max? Maybe you cut those suckers out and you just keep the one that you need. And then you could come back anytime, but at least at that point, you start decreasing, and that's the financial spring cleaning. Or you start cleaning out your closet. You sell clothes that you don't use, things that you don't really intend to use, you haven't seen in a year, things that you probably a little bit too chunky for now. You know, you start really looking at what your closet is and stuff around your house that you're really not using as much, and you sell it or you donate it. It's the spring cleaning idea about it. You take that opportunity to just clear out the clutter. On top of that, you have your IRA and HSAs. You still have an opportunity to do a prior year contribution all the way up to the tax date of the following year. So, for example, let me give you this framework. If you started, well, everything operates in a year. However, your HSA and IRA gives you an extra 4 months. So, for example, in 2021, you can invest $6,000 in an IRA. So from January to December 31st, you can invest $6,000. However, they also give you a tacked on additional from January to April 2022, or the tax day of April 15, 2022, to make those prior year contributions. So you have all the way up to that point. So if you're sitting around in March and you've invested $3,000 into 2021, in 2021, that is, and like by December per se, and then you're sitting on an extra $3,000, you could use that money to do a prior year contribution before you do your taxes, and it's actually going to help you on 9 times out of 10 if you're doing it correctly, or if you still have the traditional IRA option and you still, within those income limits, it could really lower your taxes as well. So it's an extra opportunity for you to stash in a little bit more money. And the same goes for HSA, which is the limit this year for a single person is $3,200. For a family, I believe it's $3,551. For a family is $7,200. That's, for clarity. On top of that, and I'm going to speed through, I'm not going to kind of bog you down with everything, but April itself, I believe, is Financial Literacy Month. April, the ideal that you need to understand the lingo of investing, of conversation, of budgeting, of listening to podcasts. Just take that time to really kind of dive into some books, dive into some theologies and understanding of what finance is, because it's not just akin to the being for the rich. It's actually for everybody. But the idea is there, the information there, the YouTube is there, our podcast is here. You could like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Have those conversations. Take that time to really open yourself up to understanding what finances are, because it's just part of your life, like breathing. So on top of that, April is also tax filing season. So you kind of want to get all your documents in order. You got to get it ready to go, get it filed so you can hopefully get a refund that you can use to, juice up the rest of the year. On top of that, there's May. May is summer planning month. In my opinion, that's when the family, if you're single, that's one thing, but it's a family thing. You start strategizing what your summer is going to look like, especially for parents. Hey, are you killing your kids in summer school, summer classes, summer activities? And it's also the best time to sell a home. I don't know what you're going to do. You sell a home, just sit there. But ultimately, if you're thinking about selling a home, it's one of those things that they note as the best time to sell a home. As for June, June is I call it intentional travel month, right? The idea that you're not going to be traveling for you, not for the showcase, not for the IG, the Instagram, whatever it is. Are you traveling for you? And it could just be a city over. It doesn't have to be this full-on international, I'm in Greece scenario. You could literally go down, a city or two and find something that you've never seen. Or, even better yet, you could go in your own city and find different areas that you're not necessarily familiar with. Take a staycation. Like I lived in Miami, pretty much all my life. And looking at the different areas, there's a different flavor to everything. And you might not have known that this area has this or that or the third. So open yourself up to these opportunities and do what is called intentional travel, right? On top of that, start looking into filing for your FAFSA for your kids, because I think that's almost like the last opportunity to do so. July itself, I call it launch and learn. You can either start understanding how you launch a business, launch a YouTube, launch maybe a blog or a podcast or whatever you want to do. And you can also start learning from other people. So it's building on this idea that you're continually learning throughout the year, reinventing, the way that you go about things. So you're not just a listener of this information. So you're becoming more actionable. You're getting out there. You're learning from other people. You're getting a coach if you need to, either a physical coach or a mental coach or even a holistic coach. You're just kind of getting into the flow of changing who you are. August is said as the best time to buy a home. Obviously, maybe you're not necessarily in the position to buy a home, and that's cool, but it's also a good opportunity to crack yourself a bottle of wine, maybe before or after that you do you go around with a couple of friends to check out different homes, just to actually look at it. So instead of just sitting back and watching HGTV, me and my wife used to do that all the time, kind of just go, or at least when we're getting to each other in the dating phase, we're just going to different homes and checking them out. And it was sometimes you see the decor, you see the style, and you just enjoy what it is. So you're not just watching. The goal is to get outside, get active, get the sun, get the vitamin D in your system so you can actually move forward. September, I personally think that's the annual recap. That's the moment that you kind of look back. A lot of businesses do that. A lot of corporations do that. They kind of do their business filings around that time. So I think if you position yourself to be your own personal brand, your own personal business, not a real business too, like just consider yourself like you're the employee of this ultimate business that you have. This is a good time to recap, like before the end of the year. So what have I been doing? Am I winning at this? Am I making losses? And it's okay to fail, but it's also okay to kind of like pivot and try to recap, because it's the end of the third quarter coming up and you're going to the fourth quarter. You want to, end up strong, right? And you don't want to, I know the first couple months you might have like tapered down, but you need to kind of ramp it back up and end up really strong. So count your wins and losses, count your blessings, and really keep moving forward. So it brings us to October, which we're in right now, which is financial planning month. This entire conversation has been about financial planning, and it's the idea that you're looking forward into the 2022, 2023, whatever it is, the next year. That's the whole point, understanding where you are, where you're going, and going to the next year. I think it's also a great time, and probably should add that to June, but it's also a great time to ramp up your cybersecurity awareness, make sure your passwords are right, making sure that you're not being, nobody's stealing your identity. Always ensure that you're looking out for number one, yourself and your family as well. So I guess in June, if I do a retroactive one, make sure that you're doing your credit card checks and your credit score reports, so you know exactly what those are. So because you get a free annual checkup every year anyways. October, that wraps up October. November, in my opinion, is tax planning month. That means that's the month where that's where we get new updates of the 401k, IRA, HSA contribution limits. It's an opportunity to start really, guessing how much is it going to take? And you could go on my website. I do have like resources that talk about tax planning and tax avoidance strategies. It's not tax evasion, it's tax avoidance strategies. Very legal term, very legal positions you could take where you can invest more into, let's say, your 401k, 403b, 457b, and even your traditional IRAs, HSAs, and you can change the tax outlook so you can actually reduce your taxable income, because you're investing in yourself, and the government wants you to do that. They basically provide you a benefit, and that benefit is tax avoidance. So you can actually use that money now. You could get the deduction, you could get a bigger refund, so you could do more with it as well. So it's kind of like a game that plays itself and it rewards itself. So the more you contribute to yourself, the better off you will be. So and that keeps it, let's say, yeah. And also in November is health insurance. I think that's the time when all the companies do their big open enrollment. Double check your numbers, double check your information, make sure you add your significant other to your documents. This is an opportunity that you cannot afford to miss. Review the health providers and what they're doing, what they're providing to you. See what's best for you and your family as well, because it's a lot. It's very tricky. So you got an entire month to figure it out. Take your time and do a reading. So instead of just wasting a lot of your time doing just about anything else to kind of like that's not going to benefit you, use that time, especially in November when you can, between the holidays, to read through and really apply yourself to get the best bang for your buck. And finally, December, in my opinion, is investment planning month. That's when a lot of the rich people, or people that have been invested, they realize you could kind of get through. Hopefully, you get through the Santa Claus rally, which people are spending, people are jubilant, people are buying into the market. So the stock market typically ramps up. And at some point around that time, people at the end of the year, they start selling off. Like that's the right rich people do. They sell off the stunking, the stocks that stunk throughout the year that didn't quite make sense. So they could do the tax loss harvesting about like $3,000 per year, and they kind of offset it with some gain. So a lot of people kind of see where they're at. They sell the ones that's really bad in December, and then they pick up some new stocks in January all over again. So there's the game just keeps playing. So I gave you the entire play from January to December. So I don't know if you have any excuses anymore to not know what this financial planning calendar is all about. And at the same time, I'll definitely try to do a write-up for the website so I could give it to you as well, so you could actually have a piece of paper with all the information. Yet again, financial literacy and all this stuff that has to do with it, it's not about everybody else. It's about you figuring out your own life, how you want to live it, how you want to best secure yourself so you're not struggling to from month to month, from paycheck to paycheck. That's the goal. That's our goal here at the Financial Griot. We want to ensure that you are having a good time, living your life to the extreme, the fullest, the funnest, whatever it is. But at the same time, not stressing about the finances because you got that impact or intact. Yeah, it's kind of early in the morning. I'm trying to drink a little coffee. I'm recording this episode by myself. So thanks again. My co-host will be back in another episode. And that's going to be me, the neighborhood finance guy, as well as lovely Merdelus, and as well as Atlanta, Alcin. Or Alainta, my bad. I sometimes mess it up because she goes by ATL. Hey man, be mad if you want to, but you messed it up when you call yourself ATL. But ultimately, thanks again for giving us your time, your listening, your understanding. Check us out on social media, wherever you can find us, and keep giving us likes and 5 stars and all that good stuff. And honestly, we're gonna be fine. Like financially, we're gonna do good. Or we're living, we're enjoying ourselves, we're sharing as much as we can. But the goal is for you to be fine, and for you to be fine. To be honest with you, you can't move in this game in silence. You got to move a little bit more aggressively. You got to share this with your friends. You got to define your space, define the people around you, and you change the conversation around you as well. It's not always going to be about the numbers. Once you get it down pat, it's going to be pretty easy. But for now, if you don't have your numbers down pat and you don't know what you're doing and you're scared, you're timid, just break. For me, I just broke away from that and I just share my information. So I'm not afraid of it anymore. And once you're unafraid of the information, you can start tackling it. And if you're sitting there still scared, still a little confused, still don't really know what to do, and you think somebody's going to judge you, like people are going to judge you either way. You either stay broke or become rich. I say become rich by enriching yourself with the knowledge, with the literacy that you need, and taking actionable steps. With that being said, thanks again for listening to us. And it's been a short 30-minute conversation with just me, Lawrence Delva-Gonzalez, out there in these streets with the financial griot. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Griot podcast, powered by the Wealth Builders Collective.